Oh, hello there, Guardians. You caught me dismantling random things in my Postmaster because, once again, it is full. It's a very nice segue into the video because on the right, you can see that I'm getting some currencies, which is Legendary Shards and Glimmer. And not only that, I actually got a decent roll of Palmyra, so I'm going to hold on to that one. But of course, if you haven't watched the previous parts of this guide, it is down in the comments below for you to go and watch. But let's jump straight into today's topic, which is going to be currencies within Destiny 2. And there is a lot less than what there used to be, so this should be quite easy to go into. Because I'm going to be starting off with the very basic one, which you're going to see literally everywhere, and that is called Glimmer. Now, Glimmer, despite the fact that they say this can be used for fuel, which I've never seen a purpose for it, it is basically used everywhere when it comes to buying things from vendors or using it to craft other things. Say, for example, our friendly neighborhood Master Rahul, he'll actually sell you sparrows, and it will cost Glimmer to buy these. The best way to think of this currency, it is the gold of Destiny 2. It is just used in every single transaction that you will ever come across. As for getting Glimmer, you can practically get this anywhere, whether this being running random bounties, killing random enemies, or even doing public events when you're out about in the worlds doing your quest lines. The point is, you will get a lot of this as you play the game, so I wouldn't worry too much about stockpiling it right now. But definitely in a future video, I will be talking about how you can do this, so make sure you are subscribed and staying tuned for that. But moving on to the next currency, we have Legendary Shards, which is arguably the most important currency in the game. And the reason I say that is because Legendary Shards are used for just about everything that is valuable. And what I mean by that is things like this. So this is Lord Saladin, he runs Iron Banner. You'll only see him every now and again, but basically he is just another vendor. I wouldn't worry too much about it if you don't know him. But if you open up something called Focus Decoding, which is on pretty much every vendor at this point, you will actually get a choice of weapons where you can focus engrams into, and it costs 25 legendary shards to focus one weapon. Albeit, yes, there's 20,000 Glimmer, but like I said previously, Glimmer is practically everywhere. I guarantee you will not need to worry about that too much. But the reason why legendary shards are more important is because they are harder to come by than Glimmer is. And as you saw at the very start of the video, I was dismantling some purple or legendary weapons, and they were only giving me 4 legendary shards per dismantle. And whilst you will get a fair amount of legendary weapons in your journeys that you will just dismantle, it is quite difficult to keep a good stockpile of these. But the great news about legendary shards is there is no cap on how many you can hold, so just keep stacking them and you'll be fine. But let's talk about another form of currency which you are going to be using a lot if you're upgrading your weapons, whether this is upgrading the light level or actually upgrading them to give you more stats, which I'll be giving you an example of. So the first one we have is upgrade modules. Now, as it says, you can buy these from the gunsmith, or they can be acquired from special reward sources. So some examples of the special reward sources would be the legendary campaign, for example, because when you beat an encounter on that and you get the 2 reward chests, you will actually get 2 upgrade modules every single time you open those chests. So what are upgrade modules actually used for? In the previous part, I was talking about Gear Rarity and that you should hold on to some weapons because you can actually upgrade their light level, and that's where upgrade modules come into it. So as an example, I have these Stompies, which I have not infused once because I pretty much don't use them, but it is 1600 light level. And then down at the bottom I have Farimio Strides, which is a botch standard legendary kind of item to get. 52 stats, so I'm not interested in keeping it. However, it does have 1809 light. But I want to make my Stompies stronger, so what I can actually do is if I go into details, it will actually show me a bunch of different options. So we're going to ignore the mods for now because that is going to be an entirely different video. But over here, there is something called Infuse, and it will tell you what the current power is, the power limit, which is always going to be infinite unless you find a weapon that has a power limit, which, yeah, pretty much it's quite comical that there is a power limit. But there is a seasonal power cap, which we're interested in, which is 1810 this season. But if I hover over the 1809s, you can see that they are highlighted, and it actually says dismantle for infusion at the bottom. Not only that, there's an upgrade module that will be consumed when you do this. So if I hold down F like so, it will actually incorporate it in, and that's it, 1809 Stompies now, and I don't have the item anymore. But that is literally the gist on how you can infuse weapons and infuse armor pieces as well, so it is very worthwhile keeping the ones that you want around. But as far as actually getting the upgrade modules, then you will have to meet someone called Banshee44 or Ada1, because at the bottom here, you can buy an upgrade module, which you can see it costs 10 legendary shards, 5000 Glimmer, but it also costs something called an Enhancement Core. And Enhancement Cores are arguably the most important resource in the entire game, because the amount of things that you use these for, especially in endgame, they are invaluable to keep a high stock on. And me having 94 is a bit of a travesty because the previous season I had about 400 of these. So you kind of get the gist on how quickly you can burn through these when you start getting used to the game, but basically enhancement cores are used for anything that is to do with upgrading your weapons and armor pieces. As for getting enhancement cores, however, there is lots of different ways to do this. And one way to do this is what I'm going to show you with this Memory of Cade cloak. So as you can see, it's 1809 power, but it has 7 energy. And occasionally you'll get armor pieces that drop with a high amount of energy on them, which basically just means energy for mods, but again, that's a different video. But when you actually dismantle these high energy pieces of armor, you actually get enhancement cores back like that. And this is one way that you can get them, because sometimes when you're running activities, especially in Nightfalls or maybe even just Vanguard operations, you might get a piece of equipment with higher energy, which will give you an enhancement core. Sometimes it will give you multiple enhancement cores depending on how high the energy is, so I think if you get a 9 energy piece of equipment, it'll give you back 2 or maybe even 3 enhancement cores. On top of this, you can actually get them as ranked rewards in pretty much every vendor, because like you can see with Banshee, reaching rank 4 and also rank 10 with him will give you enhancement cores. Not to mention, you can also get upgrade modules by this way as well. And this is the same for most vendors. They will tend to give you upgrade modules and enhancement cores to keep you going. So this is a very good way to passively get them as well. Another alternative to do this is if you go to Rahul, you can actually purchase them off him. Now, there is a limited amount each day. So for enhancement cores, I believe it is 5 each day. I'm going to confirm this myself because I actually want enhancement cores anyway. Yep, as you can see, 5 enhancement cores is the limit every day. So this is just a good way to pick up 5 cores and start stacking them if you have an abundance of legendary shards. Because naturally, it costs 150 legendary shards per day to actually get the cap. So I wouldn't focus too much on getting it this way, but it's definitely worth doing if you have the spare legendary shards to do it. But let's move to the left a little bit, because we have something called Enhancement Prisms. Now, Enhancement Prisms are basically the upgraded version of Enhancement Cores, which you may notice as you're upgrading your equipment, you may need some of these to actually keep upgrading it. So if you take, for example, these Iron Remembrance Strides that I actually have it, so it is a 6 energy at the moment, but when I upgrade it to 7 energy, you can see it then costs Enhancement Prisms to keep upgrading it. But the big problem with Enhancement Prisms is they are a little bit harder to get than enhancement cores, because they don't tend to drop from just any activity. And not to mention, if you want to upgrade into them, you have to spend 10 enhancement cores to get just 1, which is why I'm going to show you a nice alternative to getting both cores and prisms just passively as you're playing the game. And yes, this will be the only mod I will actually talk about in this video, because the rest of it is a lot more complicated. If you go into your inventory and then right click or whatever the button is for details on your ghost, you'll actually see you've got 4 ghost mod slots. Now, for the purpose of the video, I'm going to ignore the first 3 slots, but the 4th slot is where you want to be looking, because by hovering over these mods, you can see that some of these actually give you enhancement cores and prisms depending on which one you put on. And this is how you can tailor it to how you want to play. So for example, if you want to get more enhancement cores to start with, you can just equip the 4 energy one and it will give you an enhancement core every time you complete a Vanguard playlist strike or even a Nightfall when you're running them. Alternatively, if you want the prisms, then you equip the 6 energy one and it will give you an enhancement prism every time you do a Nightfall or a Vanguard strike. In the same breath, if you prefer playing Gambit, God forbid, then you can also have Gambit ones which allow you to get cores and prisms for defeating invaders. And if you prefer the Crucible, then you also have ones that can give you a chance to get an enhancement core or prism for every final blow that you get. This will lead me very nicely into the final piece of currency, which is known as Ascendant Shards. Now, these are very expensive. They cost 10 enhancement prisms to actually buy from Rahul, which basically means that you are spending 100 enhancement cores every time you buy one of these. But the reason you're buying these are for a very good reason, because if you actually go back to the armor piece that I was just upgrading, after taking it up to 9 energy, and this also includes weapons, you will then be required to use an Ascendant Shard. And as you can see in the bottom right corner, this is a 65 stat piece of armor. But as soon as I hover over it to upgrade it to a 10 energy, you can see that the stats are all going up. And that's because when you infuse this to a 10 energy, which I'm going to do now, it will then become Masterworked. And as you can see in the bottom right corner, it's gone from a 65 stat to a 77 stat. And that's because when you masterwork any piece of armor, it will get +2 stats to every single stat it has. As for weapons, there is a bit of difference with this, because if you masterwork a weapon, it will only increase the stat that is on the masterwork. So for example, with this SMG, it has a handling masterwork, which means every time I level this up, it will only get a handling boost. And if you think that wasn't expensive enough, then wait till you hear about exotics, because when you want to masterwork these, it takes 3 Ascendant Shards, which is the equivalent of 300 cores. And yes, I'm probably making this sound absolutely terrifying from a currency standpoint, because there is a lot of grinding to do. But when you start playing this game quite regularly, especially in Vanguard strikes and Nightfalls, you will see it is quite easy to build up a nice stockpile of these. And just in case you want to have an even quicker way of getting them, there are items that drop called Finest Matter Weave. And Finest Matter Weave will basically boost your chances of getting enhancement cores to every time you kill a boss. So whenever you're running a strike or a nightfall, always use one of these before you start, and then as soon as you get an enhancement core, I would recommend using one again, so the next boss you kill, you can get another core. It's not uncommon for me to go through a nightfall and end up getting 4 or 5 cores in one run because I'm using Finest Matter Weaves, so actually being vigilant about using these is a really good thing because it will get you a lot of rewards quick. And God forbid you're running low on Glimmer, you can use an item called Rainmaker, and this will basically give you a chance to spawn a shower of Glimmer every time you get a precision kill. Of course, there are more currencies like Harmonic Alloy and Resonant Alloy, but I'm actually going to go over these two when I actually get to weapon crafting in this guide series, so make sure you'll subscribe for that. And there are other currencies such as Phantasmal Fragments or Hero Always pieces, but Bungie is in the process of phasing these out, so I would not worry about these much. And the final piece of currency I'm going to talk about very briefly is called Spores of Conquest. And the reason I'm only going to talk about this briefly is because you get these from raids, which is end game PvE content. So it doesn't make a lot of sense for me to talk about this now because you're not going to be running any raids anytime soon because it's a 6-man activity that is supposed to be the end game of PvE. But all you need to know about these is that they can be used to redeem some very strong weapons, and also the overpowered Sparrow known as Always On Time, which is actually more of a 170 speed Sparrow than a 160. If you don't believe me, then check out my video on the eye icon up above and you will see what I mean. But you may have noticed at the start that I've left 2 currencies off, which are known as Silver and Bright Dust. And the reason I'm not talking about this much is because these are purely for cosmetics and the Season Pass. And for the Season Pass, as you might have already guessed, literally every game has one, so when you buy the premium tier, you use Silver to buy it. And Silver is basically Bungie's paid for in-game currency that you can use to buy an array of things that are in the store. It lets you buy emotes like these as they are on release, so whilst this might be amusing to some of you, I definitely like this emote, I'm not going to be paying real money for it. Which is where Bright Dust comes into play, and even though it is not used as much as I hoped it would be, it's still a very good way to get cosmetics in the game, because despite the fact that everything in this page looks like you have to pay for silver, there is a little section in the bottom left that says Bright Dust, and every Tuesday this gets reset, so there is always a new set of items to look at for Bright Dust every single week. On top of that, there is also a tab on the left called Bright Dust, which has even more items that you can buy with Bright Dust. But now the question is, how can you get Bright Dust? Because it literally just says completing certain bounties and special reward sources, which is very vague, especially for Bungie. But the special reward sources and certain bounties are what I'm going to be talking about in the next part, because I will be covering bounties and also seasonal challenges. But that's going to be it for the video. Thank you very much for watching, and if it is informative, let me know in the comments below, and also with a like on the video, it would be appreciated. But I will see you all in the next video.